The dynamic between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White is very interesting because clearly it's a relationship with a basis of respect. I mean, when Stephanie White was hired, Clark was thrilled, super excited. And coach said all the right things about coming in and coaching the Fever and coaching Caitlin Clark. Then fairly early in the season, I would say there was a bit of a philosophical divide, but it never got to be completely worked out, right? And it wasn't as if they were at odds, but I noticed when they would talk about things, and for instance, when Caitlin Clark had come back from one of her injuries.
All right, so picture this. During a live national broadcast, Caitlin Clark delivered a set of razor-sharp comments that sent shockwaves through the entire league. She was discussing her role, especially after returning from injury, and she acknowledged what coach Stephanie White had been emphasizing, the importance of becoming a stronger screener and playing off the ball more often. She recognized those coaching notes, sure, but almost instantly there was this unmistakable, almost challenging edge in her voice. She doubled down on what she believes without hesitation. She said plainly, "I'm at my best when the ball is in my hands." This wasn't just a casual remark. It came across as a direct, unmistakable pushback, a public counter to her own coach's stated philosophy. The message was crystal clear to anyone watching, and it immediately created a tension you could practically feel, the kind that threatens to disrupt an entire system before it even has time to form. The moment after she said it felt heavy, almost silent, exposing a very real philosophical divide right there for the world to see.
Right, and it wasn't as if they were at odds, but I noticed when they would talk about things, and for instance, when Caitlin Clark had come back from one of her injuries and Erin McDonald was there, and they were asking about playing together, and Clark referenced some of the talking points Stephanie White has made, like being a better screener, about playing off ball, but then she, reiterated that she's at the best with the ball in her hands. And that reminded me of when I was there for the Liberty game, the first Liberty game that Clark got hurt in, not the one that she came back and exploded in. And before that game, there was a little bit of a hint of,
when Stephanie White was first hired by the Fever, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive, especially from Caitlin Clark, who was reportedly thrilled about the decision. White came in saying all the right things, promising to coach with passion, and more importantly, to fully support her star player. On paper, it looked like a perfect match. But here's the surprising part. That honeymoon phase didn't last long at all. Almost before the season even found its rhythm, a noticeable philosophical divide began forming between them. It wasn't outright conflict, not in the beginning, but it was clear that a deep difference of opinion was emerging, specifically about how the team should function and, even more pointedly, how Caitlin Clark should be utilized on the floor. The tension wasn't loud or public at first, but it was undeniably simmering just beneath the surface. A subtle fracture in the foundation of their partnership that dedicated fans picked up on almost instantly. The initial respect was real, absolutely, but the early cracks that appeared hinted at much deeper, more complicated issues waiting just ahead.
And then fans took that and turned it into Stephanie White will destroy Caitlin Clark and all that. We never got a chance to see them completely gel. When Clark had come back, even when she was playing hobbled before the groin injury that ultimately ended her season when the ankle injury compounded it, the Fever were rolling. They had won a couple of games in a row there, but not only just did they win them, they looked like a machine. And that was with Clark struggling to shoot because she was obviously hobbled with injuries. But then when the Fever go on and they win without Caitlin Clark, and clearly Stephanie White proves she's a hell of a coach, and the rest of the team steps up,
The first major public sign of this growing divide surfaced when Clark, still working her way back from injury, was asked directly about her role, especially in relation to teammate Erica Wheeler. She gave the standard responses at first, acknowledging White's emphasis on playing off the ball and improving her screening. It was polite, expected, almost automatic. But then the real Caitlin Clark, the ultra-competitive, unmistakably confident playmaker came through. She reaffirmed her own philosophy without hesitation, stating that she performs at her highest level when the ball is in her hands, when she's initiating the offense, controlling the pace, and acting as the primary decision maker. This wasn't a minor preference. It was a clear, definitive statement about who she is as a player, one that stood in stark contrast to the system White was trying to build. In that moment, it felt far less like a player adapting to a new role and far more like a subtle, yet unmistakably public rejection of the direction her coach had laid out for her.
Fever go on and they win without Caitlin Clark, and clearly Stephanie White proves she's a hell of a coach, and the rest of the team steps up. Clark celebrated in that moment. And I know for a fact that they have a good relationship, right? So it's just intriguing because they never got a chance to fully flesh out their on-court relationship. They have a great off-court relationship, and so much has been made of their relationship since without us having a chance to actually see the substance. And then when Stephanie White says anything, it gets run with, like when she had talked about how important Kelsey Mitchell was to the team. I don't even forget that.
And here's the fascinating part. The public moment we just discussed actually mirrored an earlier, more subtle clash that took place before a key matchup against the Liberty. Once again, White emphasized the importance of Clark playing off the ball, framing it as a way to give her some much-needed rest while improving the team's offensive rhythm. On paper, it sounded perfectly reasonable, but Clark's response, though respectful, carried that same quiet hint of resistance. She acknowledged the potential advantages, a short breather, a smoother offensive flow, yet she immediately circled back to her core belief. She is at her most effective, her most dominant, when she's running the offense with the ball in her hands. By that point, it was obvious that this wasn't just a minor tactical disagreement or a conversation about one specific adjustment. It was a deep, fundamental collision of basketball philosophies, a genuine power struggle forming beneath the surface, one that felt ready to erupt at any moment.
And then when Stephanie White says anything, it gets run with, like when she had talked about how important Kelsey Mitchell was to the team. I don't even forget the exact comments, but it was the most innocent comment ever, especially when they're trying to re-sign Kelsey Mitchell in free agency. But it's like, wow, she didn't say Caitlin Clark was the be-all, end-all of everything all the time, and therefore she, hates her. But regardless, Stephanie White was on with Sue Bird on her Bird's Eye View podcast and specifically talked about Caitlin Clark and said some things that I think fans will like to hear, especially coming from her.
How important was it to forge that relationship with her?
Naturally, fans and the media did what they always do. They grabbed onto these subtle exchanges and amplified them into a full-scale narrative of conflict. That philosophical divide we've been discussing was quickly sensationalized, with bold headlines implying that Stephanie White was undermining Caitlin Clark's game or, even worse, limiting her rare generational talent. Public perception of the team shifted almost overnight. Instead of being seen as a unified group, they were suddenly viewed as an organization weighed down by internal tension. Every comment, every small gesture from either side was dissected in microscopic detail, intensifying the pressure on both the coach and her star player. The absence of any clear public clarity or resolution only made things worse. What might have been routine disagreements behind the scenes began to look like major power struggles played out under the relentless, hyper-scrutinized spotlight of national attention.
Things that I think fans will like to hear, especially coming from her.
How important was it to forge that relationship with her for all the reasons?
I mean, really important. I'd had just a little bit of a relationship with Caitlin from calling her games a number of times, when she was in college, but it was very important. Look, she's obviously the centerpiece of everything that we do. And most importantly for me was just connecting and building trust. I don't know how she does what she does and handles it so gracefully. I'm not sure, myself as a.
Finally, Stephanie White had her long-awaited chance to speak directly to all the swirling speculation when she appeared on Sue Bird's widely followed Bird's Eye View podcast. And she didn't waver for a moment. This was her moment of clarity, her firm, definitive response. Not anger, not confrontation, but a steady, confident explanation of her coaching philosophy that pushed back against every perceived criticism of her methods. White emphasized repeatedly the critical importance of building a strong, trusting relationship with Clark, not just recognizing her as a superstar, but understanding that she is someone who needs to be challenged, guided, and shaped in order to unlock her full potential. Her words came across as a precise, strategic rebuttal, a deliberate effort to reassert her authority and clarify her vision amid intense public scrutiny. She laid out her coaching principles with unmistakable conviction, ensuring everyone understood exactly where she stood.
But I'm going to be honest, and I think that I certainly appreciate that about her. And I'm also the same kind of psycho that she is in terms of like competitiveness. Now it comes out in different ways, but we both just really want to win, and we want to set ourselves and our teammates up for success. And so it was really important for me, right away with her.
So a few important things I think that were said there. Number one was she's the centerpiece of everything that we do. So that will be received really well out there amongst CCFC. And it's right? Everybody knows that, both on the basketball court and from the business.
On that same podcast, White delivered another striking statement, one that, at first glance, seemed to contradict the tension building around the team. She said, "She's obviously the centerpiece of everything we do." It was an unmistakable acknowledgement of Clark's enormous value, not only her on-court brilliance, but also her unmatched influence as a driving force for the league. However, and this is where things get truly interesting, White followed that seemingly conciliatory comment with a firm, deeply held coaching principle delivered with absolute certainty. She continued, "I'm a firm believer that you have to coach and challenge your best players." This was not a walk back. It wasn't a softening of her stance. It was a powerful declaration of intent. White made it clear that Clark's role as the franchise centerpiece did not exempt her from demanding coaching. In fact, White argued that her superstar status required even higher expectations. It was a clear boundary, a bold statement about what true leadership demands, especially when guiding a team built around a generational talent.
Get through to her a little bit because she had a little bit of that Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant DNA in her. And that's a great combination. So it's exciting to see how it goes going forward, because they didn't have a chance. They like each other. They trust each other. They're both great at what they do. So it's hard to see it not working out. And Caitlin, seeing what the team was able to do without her, that's got to be helpful in a certain sense to know what they're capable of. And then them knowing what they're capable of without her, and then knowing what she is capable of.
White didn't hold back when describing her coaching style. She openly called herself an honest, highly transparent leader, someone whose direct communication might ruffle a few feathers, but is, in her view, essential for building real trust. This wasn't framed as a suggestion. It was a non-negotiable expectation for everyone on the roster, especially her star. Her message was unmistakable: no guessing games, no hidden agendas. If a player had a concern, they were expected to speak up. That commitment to blunt clarity, what she viewed as the core pillar of her leadership, served as her firm response to anyone questioning her authority, a demand for equal transparency from her team. One of White's most revealing comments came when she admitted, almost with a jolt, "I'm the same kind of psycho she is when it comes to competitiveness." It wasn't a throwaway line. It was a direct challenge, a public declaration that she shared the same relentless, uncompromising drive that fuels Clark. Their competitive instincts might look different on the surface, but White made it clear she operates with the same burning edge. In that moment, she leveled the field between them, reframing any tension not as personal conflict, but as the natural collision of two elite competitors who both want absolute victory. Despite everything said publicly, the on-court partnership between White and Clark never had a real chance to develop. Clark battled injuries throughout the season, first a persistent ankle issue, then the devastating groin injury that ended her year. The promising vision of their philosophies finally aligning, of White's structure merging with Clark's brilliance, never materialized. That unfulfilled potential only heightened the weight of every public comment, every perceived jab, because there was no on-court evidence to counter the speculation. Interestingly, Clark has a long track record of pushing back against constraints. Early in her career, she famously compared her deep-range shooting to Steph Curry's, insisting, "You don't tell Steph Curry not to take those shots." That mindset exposed something fundamental. Clark has an unwavering belief in her instincts and a natural resistance to being boxed in by traditional coaching expectations. Looking back, the comment practically foreshadowed her later reactions to White's guidance, a reminder that Clark has never hesitated to stand her ground when she believes in her approach. White's coaching philosophy, however, directly challenged Clark's preference for a ball-dominant style. White focused heavily on Clark's development as an off-ball threat, catch and shoot proficiency, improved screening angles, and learning the precise moments when she should defer control to teammates. These weren't tweaks. They were foundational adjustments that required Clark to evolve beyond habits she had relied on for years. White's insistence on this growth became her strongest counterpoint to Clark's belief that she already knew how to maximize her own game. Another revealing moment came when the Fever began winning without Clark on the floor. While Clark was injured or limited, the team looked unexpectedly cohesive, stringing together several impressive victories. It was a quiet but powerful validation of White's system. It proved she could build a functioning, successful unit even without her brightest star operating at full strength. And while Clark surely celebrated her team's success, those wins simultaneously reinforced White's authority and the depth she had crafted within the roster. Clark's legendary competitive fire only intensifies this dynamic. She has long been compared to icons like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant for her relentless drive. Both Lisa Bluder and Jan Jensen have acknowledged how challenging it could be to break through to her because of that fierce, internal edge. This is the very trait White recognized in herself, and the very trait that explains why Clark might push back against anything she perceives as limiting her path to winning. This isn't disrespect, it's the fierce self-belief shared by the greatest players in the sport. In such an environment, even harmless comments risked becoming fuel for controversy. When White praised Kelsey Mitchell's importance during contract discussions, some fans twisted the comment into an implication that Clark wasn't the centerpiece. It highlighted the impossible tightrope White had to walk. Every word she spoke carried extra weight, often being reinterpreted as something she never intended. Yet despite the tension, real trust began to form. Clark publicly voiced support for White during the Fever's strong late-season push, even while she was sidelined. It was a meaningful gesture that suggested their relationship was deeper than the surface-level drama. White herself stressed that earning Clark's trust was essential before she could effectively challenge her, a sign that mutual respect was growing even through all the noise. White's performance throughout the season, navigating injuries, guiding the team to unexpected success, and managing intense public scrutiny was extraordinary. Her ability to hold the group together and push them to a strong finish served as a clear, undeniable validation of her coaching philosophy. It was her silent, confident response to critics who doubted she could lead a star-driven team. But White's greatest challenge was never just coaching Clark. It was integrating a once-in-a-generation talent into a system where she could elevate her teammates as much as herself. White's emphasis on shared trust, ball movement, and situational control wasn't designed to restrict Clark, but to amplify her impact. She believed that Clark's brilliance would shine even brighter within a balanced, collaborative structure. A championship future is absolutely within reach, but it hinges on whether White's uncompromising standards and Clark's fierce independence can blend into a unified philosophy. The Fever's success without Clark, paired with Clark's unrivaled individual genius, creates one of the most intriguing dynamics in the league. Both know exactly who Caitlin Clark is, a generational force. The question is whether her deeply ingrained need to command the game can coexist with White's insistence on growth, balance, and trust. It's a high-stakes chess match where every comment, every adjustment, every perceived slight shapes their trajectory. The potential outcomes are thrilling, the foundation of a dynasty or a prolonged, captivating clash between two extraordinary competitors. What remains undeniable is this: they like each other, they trust each other, and both are exceptional at what they do. But whether their contrasting approaches can merge into a true championship formula remains the sport's most compelling unanswered question. The tension is real, the stakes are immense, and the ending, whether triumph or friction, has yet to be written.